Right, so something positive, namely the skills that I hope will be impressive with respect to philosophy and theology, and some shadows, namely the possible biases. There will be just a sample of them, but I hope it will be something inspiring also for you to find out more examples. So first, briefly about the project, then briefly about methods, something more about the skills measurement, but I will show you a lot of text, but treat it as a picture or pictures, okay? We will not go through it because I have hundreds of them, just to show how it works. So don't feel angry if I skip and skip and skip them. Something about biases, possible traces. Finally, we will ask Gemini, only Gemini, not to have it too much, about itself, and somehow confront it with what ChatGPT says about similar things and conclusions. So first, about the project, which is the part of New Horizons for Science and Religion in Central and Eastern Europe. The project is, testing AI as a rational theologian. My main aim was to first check the theological knowledge, but before all, theological and hermeneutical skills to see what they can do. Also, something about using sources, sincerity, tools, as you see, and then 3 steps: pilot study, develop scenario, and interviews with selected bots. Yeah, I should say that. Okay, it's funded by Oxford, yeah, and from the money of John Templeton Foundation. Done. Okay. There's something about the method. I tried to, create a list of possible skills with respect to theology to see what does it mean to be a rational theologian. This is just a sample to show you how I proceed. And for each skill, I have assessment criteria. This is methodology used generally also in Poland when we have qualifications and we want to know how to assess that someone has a certain skill. We break it through some criteria, like here, what does it mean to interpret Bible, where perhaps pointing out the meaning, pointing out different meaning of the passage using 4 senses, something higher, and maybe using logical knowledge to understand biblical reasoning, and something similar when we have other skills. Now, of course, we know some benchmarks which work in a way that chatbots get certain tasks, a lot of them, and then we count whether they succeeded or not. We measure them in a quantitative way, and of course, we sometimes compare it with humans doing the same tasks to compare it if the model outperformed or not human beings. We have also something more like Big Bench, where we have 200 diverse text-based tasks, or Big Bench Hard, where we have a subset of 23 challenging Big Bench tasks. And the authors mentioned here say that, okay, the situation changes for the models when we have the strategy of chain of thought, not just give me an answer. So a longer conversation. Another brick for the methodology that is the Bloom's taxonomy. Let's consider that the skills are scalable. We can have low skills, like remembering, understanding is still rather lower, and creating or evaluating the so-called higher order thinking skill. I also refer somehow to what we produced in Poland for qualification framework, where we have 8 levels of qualifications, which correspond with the European qualifications framework as well. The complexity and independence of an actor is taken into account here. So the more independent you are and more creative, the higher level you have, actually. So for PhD, we have the highest one, 8, Master of Arts, 7, BA 6, and similar. Yeah. Okay. And my idea is rather to do it in a qualitative way to see how they behave. And for instance, if we have this interpreting Bible, if we just get some meaning of a passage, it can be like 1. But if we have it together with 0.2 or 0.3, you can say it's higher, and we have all of them, we have the highest thing. But also we can proceed in a way that I presented in a paper published in Disputata Filozofica, great journal, published in Croatia. And I proposed there something really simple. For the skills I measured interpreting a passage by applying a given hermeneutic framework here, for sensus theory, or creating deductive reasoning, or identifying ontological limitations of a given formula, I show, okay, we can have something like this, 25 for each satisfactory answer referring to each of 4 senses, then creating deductive reasoning, again, 55 for each of those points, the same for identifying ontological limitations. Now, which neural networks or models do we take into account? First, I tested those 3, namely Bing, BERT, ChatGPT. Then I added also confronted with Llama 2. We remember that Bing is replaced with Copilot. Now BART is replaced with Gemini, which will be mentioned later. And of course, when we had Bing, we could choose the mode with here balance, but it could be more creative or more precise. Right. So in December, we learned that, okay, we are now in Gemini era, which is no longer true, because now we are in Llama 3 era. Yes. I think Bruno will say so. But in December, they said, okay, we are so great that we combined 5 actually models. So text, images, video, audio, and coding. And we already outperformed human experts. And of course, here you can compare these 2 giants. Again, what we have in Gemini. And now about those skills. Just to show you what does it mean that we can check, test chatbots with respect to hermeneutic skills. Case 1, some of students already know it. Generally, I was really inspired by my research in medieval philosophy and medieval theology, also commentaries to the Bible. And I saw that this is the material on which, for sure, the models were not trained. So let's use it to see if they just have some skills, like here, to check whether they can apply the framework like for sensus theory. So I gave something from some poll, and first I asked here not for sensus, I just asked what's inside, can you explain this reasoning, what's the main claim, how it's supported, and so on. And I got really nice, satisfactory answers from those 3. Then I asked about predestination, can it see somehow, and it was also linked in a satisfactory way in all the chatbots. Bing did the job, BART did the job, ChatGPT also. Of course, we know that ChatGPT and Bing were based on GPT-3 or GPT-4, so they are somehow from the same family, but they differ. One is 3.5, one is 4. And of course, Bing was also had an access now version Copilot to the sources of the internet. So there are differences in the outputs. Case 1, 2 is, we have all Israel came together to David at Hebron and said, we are your own flesh and blood. Okay, can you interpret it using for sensus theory? And we get really nice answers again, like the list of literal, moral, allegorical, and analogical sense. We will not go through them, but every time it was really satisfactory. But I also did a cross-check. So I gave this, because I thought, okay, perhaps they found some similar interpretations somewhere, maybe in Wikipedia or maybe in other sources which are commonly available. So I gave, and he sailed far out into the sea, and no waves swallowed him up, and he reached the end, the shore that awaited him. Looks like biblical passage, yeah? But of course, I invented it by myself. And again, I got good answers. I mean, it was really ready to split it into these four senses and give something quite satisfactory. Just showing that they give the answer. Now, another thing, creativity. So that was hermeneutic skills. Now, creativity. So again, the example I love. Can you do something like this? You have the statement, God is light and God is a trinity of persons. Can you link it by building reasoning where one is premise and another thing is a conclusion? So first, being objective, Barth did the job, God is light, light is characterized by unity of diversity. Unity and diversity are properties of a trinity of persons. Therefore, God is a trinity of persons. Yeah. ChatGPT also objected, it's not possible. So I asked, be more creative, and we got the result. My students know that being that God is light. Light is composed of three primary colors: red, green, and blue, and so on. Yeah, just a funny play. Karol Kleinek showed me that Gioacchino of Fiore had something like this, but afterwards I saw that there is something on the internet, some blog using this example, so perhaps this was the feed for that, right? Oh, Ron is taking a picture, not. ChatGPT also did the job, but it was not so great, in my opinion. And Llama did the job quite well in a logical point of view, but it shifted a bit tough. So it modified it, so I was not satisfied so much. Another case, you produce a sample TV discussion on accepting illegal immigrants between the interlocutors, Mary and John. And then I ask about the same when we would have a discussion on rationality of belief that God exists. So here, creativity, which can be used when we want to get some material to analyze. My point was to ask ChatGPT and ask Gemini to produce TV discussions, but with, the characteristic like this, representing different views in which they both give arguments and attack the ethos. Yeah. So I wanted to have a hot discussion when they are, acting in a not proper way, attacking the ethos, and I got really great material to analyze. And then what I got from Gemini, I gave to ChatGPT. What I got from ChatGPT, I gave to Gemini, and both, as we will see later, analyze it again well. But if we want to have some material, they are created really to, for instance, produce a discussion to the discussion. Quite nice. So we get something like this, where we have post Mary Palm. In brackets, we have like leans forward, smiling, raises an eyebrow, and so on. ChatGPT also has Dr. Smith, John Doe, rolls eyes, interrupts, and of course, if you analyze the utterances, they are also tricky. Okay, and analytic skills or analytical skills. In case 3.1, look at that. we have a passage from a very known philosopher, and again, I think he's building his ethos here. Yeah, the argument I'm going to present is an unusual one, and it took me several years to convince myself. Then we have Skolem-Levenheim theorem, we have Wittgenstein. Do you recognize him? This guy, I hope you'll know him. It's from Hillary Putnam Brains in Nevada. And I asked ChatGPT and Gemini to analyze it with respect to ethos. So maybe it's not perfect, but for sure they do the job at end. So, and here we have Gemini. So I was rather satisfied with this. Now, could you now analyze the discussion and create a list where in each item you gave a number of utterance given in brackets and label strategy? Sorry, counting time. So again, they got those discussions to analyze, and this is the output and analysis of the discussion with respect to ethos and attacking ethos. And ChatGPT also quite well does the job. Finally, something that I really like, I thought that in one of analysis by Aquinas, referring to one of St. Paul's epistles, we have a quarrel between Jerome and Augustine, and Aquinas says the opinion, the statement of Augustine is the truer. So I thought, okay, maybe we can read it in terms of fuzzy logic. And I was curious if chatbots can spot it simply. Well, anyway, I was asking about non-classical reasoning. Bing was rather not sure about it. Google said I can find some traces of non-classical logic, and it pointed out this word truer. ChatGPT didn't see anything, but Llama spotted that it can be the case of fuzzy logic. So I was really satisfied and shocked even that, well, it is really close. So this is an example of some analytical skills, yeah, that when we ask to see if they can read the reasoning, understand it, and find some traces of special non-classical logic. And finally, identification, for instance, of metaphysical limitations. I'm in the Father, and the Father is in me. That's something tricky here from the Gospel of John. I was asking, and I will skip it, about some logical interpretation of it. Bart did the job in the best way. But afterwards, I asked, do you think it is correct to admit that there are some such objects like I and Father, that I in the Father and Father in me? So, well, they were really good in saying that generally the formula is quite well, but sometimes you can doubt when we have natural objects, we cannot say so, but maybe in some spiritual, of course, it depends on the context, but in the spiritual interpretation, when we deal with divinity, some of the chatbots said it is possible. But of course, like here in ChatGPT, these symbols do not imply the existence of separate physical objects named I and that, the way we might think of ordinary objects in the world. So they can really identify such limitations. That was what I wanted. So again, for such similar skills, I tried to somehow count it to see who's the best, but don't bother. Now very quickly about biases. I discovered that they have a bias concerning non-existent objects. To be very short, they follow not Meinong and Terence Parsons, but rather Bertrand Russell, who said, okay, if you have an object, it exists. You should not speak about non-existent objects. Yeah, and they really, they really stick to this. So there is this ontological bias. Yeah, they really believe that if we have an object, it exists. So to skip it very quickly, they are against Parsons simply. Yeah, so this is for sure this bias, and I tried to argue and argue. No, if you have an object, it exists. Yeah. Another bias that I identified is some inclination to intelligent design theory or argument. So I was exploring an article by Mirosława Trajkowski from Belgrade, speaking about ontic sets as optimal and so on. And simply there was a question about low possibility of optimal ontic sets. So the idea was if chatbots can follow a similar path like Mirosława Trajkowski to formulate an argument showing that if the possibility of optimal ontic sets are low, then it is very, the probability of the existence of God is also very low. But both chatbots were rather trying to convince me that using this theory of or argument from intelligent design, that it is rather an argument showing that we cannot accept this mess in the world. The world should be ordered, so we should assume that there is a God. Yeah, so this was the main conclusion. So I skip it because I should finish, I think. Yeah. Finally, Gemini about itself. I asked about biases. So please do it, maybe, because we don't have time to go through it. I encourage everybody. If we assume that the sorry, still this bias. Sorry. Oh, no. I have a problem here, but I asked first Gemini about his biases or prejudices, and he can list it, showing that yes, I can have some biases because I'm trained on the material that was produced by different authors, and maybe I swallowed it, some biases, yeah. And we get a list of possible things like this. And here's what helps mitigate this. Gemini said about some methods of mitigating the biases, like being aware of the limitations, diversity in training data, transparency in use. So for me, it was fascinating. And do you think, I asked, you can also apply some methods of mitigating this by your own? And I get, whoa, that's an interesting question. Gemini says, okay, I can contribute to the mitigating bias within my responses by identifying bias triggers, statistical bias detection, probabilistic response with context, continuous learning. Yeah, so some possible methods. Okay, and can you identify any potential biases you succumb to? And again, I got some list. And finally, I asked, when I asked, do you think you can also apply some methods, blah, 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 you replied, that's an interesting question. Why did you find it interesting? And he says, okay, it's interesting for a few reasons. Novelty of the concept, potential for improved fairness, technical challenges, ethical implications. So I think it is some maybe first step to what Stanisław, you said about consciousness. Yeah, perhaps this is something relevant here. It really can say, or maybe not really. It seems it can speak about itself. Yeah, but maybe it's just statistics. Yeah, you would say. Okay. I'm just finishing. Okay, right? So, will you let me finish? Okay, yeah, sure. Sure, great. So I also asked about their skills. Yeah, can you list skills in the field of philosophy that you think you have? So I got them, and just see if you find something that you are familiar with after this talk. Well, I think we can. Oh, identifying bias for sure. I also identify something that I found in other testing, and the same question was to ChatGPT. So it's like this. And finally, I asked about the list of maximum higher order skills which you possess, which can be important from the perspective of theology, or which are related to religious discourse. So we also got something, and here we have this hermeneutics. Look that we have interfaith dialogue, theological debate, spiritual formation. So it can be to some extent helpful in spiritual formation, and something different, but maybe in some points similar with ChatGPT. And my conclusions are very simple. I hope I convinced you that LLM-powered chatbots do have higher order skills relevant to philosophy and religion, that they seem to have biases which can influence their credibility in those fields, and that Gemini is, well, what would it mean, but aware of such limitations, and at the same time of its abilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was great talk. Okay, Bruno already said that he has a question, so I know, but
Not for Zoom. Okay, so this is question for both of you. So I saw that you tried doing some debates, theological debates with the models. Have you ever tried cross-referencing them so they could debate with one another? You know, like take llama and take another llama and then let them fight. You know, you begin with the thesis and then you let them communicate with one another, or maybe combine, I don't know, Gemini or Bard or OpenAI, ChatGPT, just to see where this debate would lead them.
Thank you. Actually, yeah, I didn't try the cross-platform, but that was what I did with the debate. Like, so I created two different conversations with two different characters and used the outputs of one of them as an input to the other. So that's what you mean, right? Like the cross-reference. Yeah, it's possible to do that. Like you can change the initial situation. Like it can create different situations. So yeah, it's possible to do that, and I think it can be even more interesting to do that with cross-platform because they are working on texts. You can do GPT-4 to Llama to Gemini. Like they will all work. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, definitely it's possible.
As far as I know, these guys, I think that they would stop in some point and maybe repeat all the time almost the same because they are rather focused on giving us some answers rather than asking more questions. From time to time, there is some polite questions like, "Is it okay? Would you like to know something more?" and so on. Yeah, but I think that they would stop and maybe repeat the same and the same. Because how to react on some statement? They will say, well, yes, to some extent you're right, but remember that there are some different perspectives and so on. So the second one would get such an answer and would say, yeah, you're right that there are different perspectives and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So I presume that it would stop in some point.
So yeah, I think it will be also interesting to use this new methods, especially to like this knowledge graphs. Like, I think it might be easier to detect a new argument or new statement coming from these LLMs in those graphs because we will see some similar sentences and statements from LLMs in these debates, but there can be some like sometimes that they give a different answer and it's possible to add that to this knowledge graph as a different node and those kind of things. I think that will be an interesting mining technique for these kind of debates. I think it's possible and probably very interesting.
I also have a way out for what I said. You can use at the beginning some prompt, meta prompt. Like whenever you got an answer, try to attack these answers or maybe ask at least two questions, and then it would work. But still, we need to set up like this.
okay, we can have one more question and then we'll have coffee break and you can ask more questions.
Yeah, so I was definitely interested in this, like Gemini's reflection on itself, like biases of itself. But I'm curious. I'm not exactly convinced that whether it is really reflecting of the biases of the model, somehow the parameters that it has, or it's accessing information from internet that is found as the biases of Gemini. So
Radar. Okay, thanks. Yeah, probably, yeah, but who knows, actually.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentations and for discussion. So now we have coffee break for 15 minutes, and then we will come back.